So what is REST? REST stands for Representational States Transfer, and it is an architectural pattern. Roy Fielding firstly introduced REST in 2000 in his doctoral presentation. In REST, communication is always stateless. Here stateless means if you send one request after getting a response, the relationship will break. So you must send a new request and get a new response. If you want to maintain your state, you can keep it on the client side. In REST, you can define multiple responses for the same resource method. So you can get a response in the form of JSON, XML, CSV, PDF, HTML, images, or any format. REST uses the HTTP method to operate resources in the form of get, put, post, and delete. JSON is the most generally popular file format and easy to read and understandable by humans and machines. Now we'll discuss about principles of REST architectural style. So here first one is uniform interface. All the requests for the same resource should look the same, no matter where the request comes from. The REST API should ensure that the same piece of data, such as the name or email address of a user, belongs to only one uniform resource identifier. Resources should not be too large but should contain every piece of information that the client might need. So this is the example of a JSON format and it comes from a response. Here each resource method has one unique identifier, which will send a request to access a method and get the response. So you can see here we have get, post, put, delete, uniform resource identifier. Second one is client-server model. In REST API design, client and server applications must be completely independent of each other. The only information the client application should know is the URI of the requested resource. It can't interact with the server application in any other ways. Similarly, a server application should not modify the client application other than passing it to the requested data via HTTP. Stateless. In REST architecture, stateless refers to a communication method in which the server completes every client request independently of all previous requests. Clients can request resources in any order, and every request is stateless or isolated from other requests. This REST API design constraint implies that the server can completely understand and fulfill the request every time. Cacheability. RESTful web services support caching, which is the process of storing some response on the client or on an intermediary to improve server response time. The server cannot take advantage of any previously stored context information on the server. For this reason, the client application must entirely keep the session state. For example, suppose that you visit a website that has common header and footer images on every page. Every time you visit a new website page, the server must resend the same images. To avoid this, client cache or stores these images after the first response and then uses the images directly from the cache. Now the question comes how this RESTful API works. RESTful API looks like we browse our websites on internet. So here client application contacts the server by using the API when it requires a resource. And API developers explain how the client should use the REST API in the server application API documentation. These are the general steps for any REST API call. So in the first step, client will send a request to the server and client will follow whatever API documentation he got, and based on that he will send a request so server can understand. After this, server will authenticate is correct or not. If the client has right to send the request, server will authenticate it. In the third step, server receives the request and process it internally. In the process part, it will do the business logic. In the fourth step, server will return a response to the client. And in this response may contain information that tells the client whether the request was successful or not. The responses also includes any information that the client requested. And this request may come in the form of JSON, XML, images, CSV, or any other format. The REST API request and response details vary slightly depending on how the API developers design the API.